Hello and welcome everybody to our April, well, normally it would be the April live stream. This is the April not live stream. So it's been quite a busy month as ever. We've been out and about a lot, haven't we? So let's start with Believe in Scotland's litter picking campaign.
You two are just heroines about that, you know. I know
Totally
you go out there. I keep thinking, I could do that, and I never get round to it. But. So that was what? How many people for how long?
I think there was about 13 of us, and not everyone's. It was kind of set for 2 hours, and some people stayed as long as they could. People had various things on. Probably about 30 bags of litter collected.
Amazing. I was out with an acquaintance just the other day, and we were talking about campaigning and things, and they raised the litter picking and kind of went, well, I mean, I don't see the point. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because this person's definitely, you know, pro-indie, very. And I was saying, well, okay, but it's a good thing to do in itself. And if you have bags that then all say yes on them, then that makes it clear to anyone going past that these yes supporters care about the local area and they're willing to go out and do something. And he's going, oh, well, that won't get votes. And I'm going, I'm not so sure about that. It just opens someone's mind in a kind of ordinary way, and presumably they think this has made a difference to my life now when I have a wee walk along this path.
And it's funny that the things that will flick a switch in people's minds, you do get the odd naysayer, but most people that come past thank you for doing it and say what a difference you've made, and you can have a wee bit chat with them, and you can get into the conversation about, you know, with people who say, oh, the council should be doing that. We can have the discussion, well, actually, no, people shouldn't be dropping litter. But people have actually said to Fiona and I, isn't it a shame we don't have a deposit return scheme?
Well, they didn't realise who they were saying that to, Lynn, did they? Start talking about return schemes to Fiona.
we just agree with them. Yes, it is a shame we don't have
Yeah. Anyway, that was great. Well done, you two.
And well done to everybody who took part in your own locations as well. It was great to see the Yes Movement out and doing something together again. The next exciting thing we've been up to, of course, Marlene and I became international video stars. That's over-egging it a little.
Also directors and producers.
So we were in Brussels. We were there to do some filming as part of a delegation that Yes for EU and Europe for Scotland had organised to get right inside the European Parliament. So we spent a whole day there. It was just so uplifting, wasn't it, Marlene?
It was. It was great fun. We were nervous about doing it. You know, there was definitely technical things that we were having to think through that we haven't actually come up against before. But anyway, as it turned out, it was all fine. And then when we got to Brussels, and that first evening when you and I just went out to find something to eat, we ended up in a lovely sort of wee local outdoor pizza place. And I was dead chuffed with myself because I managed to go up and order the pizza and the 2 beers and have a little chat with the chap in the shop, all in French. Which was, you know, considering I haven't actually used French for decades, that was really good. But being in the Parliament building was just fantastic. And that's really what made the whole thing a success, because it meant that MEPs and their policy advisors and campaigners who came to talk to us, they just had to get in the lift and find us. The thing that I think impacted on us the very beginning was when we were going through the square and up the steps into the building. That was so emotional.
It was. We were all sort of welling up, you know, this is us walking back into the European Parliament. It really was very special. I think that the thing that struck me most from the whole day, being immersed in this absolute welcome and positivity. And Scotland, viewed from the outside, is completely different to the, you know, rubbish narrative that we get from the mainstream media in the UK. You almost need to be outside in order to see ourselves as others see us, I suppose. In fact, we've got a little clip. And this is Austrian MEP Thomas Waits. Just set the tone for the whole visit.
I very much regret that Scotland is not part of the European Union anymore. I was enjoying so much working with all the Scottish MEPs here in the House. A very important European voice is missing here in Parliament, and we still keep the seats free, and we're not giving up the hope that you finally manage to rejoin.
It was really good, wasn't it? And there was a bits of gaps between people coming and speaking to us. So Fiona and I wandered off down to the main floor and we found the cafe. I had on my Pensioners for Indy one, but...
And that flag that Marlene was holding there, that's the one that I had at Holyrood the night we came out of the EU. So it just seemed quite important.
Poignant,
yeah. I hadn't realised that. Yeah, it was just great, and there was quite a few of the people that we were talking to who, them outside looking at Scotland, raised the whole thing about, yes, we want you back, but there's also a matter of democracy, because if the Scots want to get back, then you shouldn't be stopped from getting back, and we won't stop you. We won't stop you entering. We want you back. A hint that where the people are who are doing the stopping, i.e. Westminster. Yeah. But it was a great day, actually. It was just really inspiring, really, really inspiring being there. Yeah. Lots to say about that visit, and we're going to be seeing it in a separate podcast that will be out soon.
That'll be on I think it's Tuesday the 13th that premieres. But before then, one of the reasons we were there doing the filming was to provide some material to Yes for EU, because they're having an event on the 9th of May, which is Europe Day. You can get tickets from Eventbrite for that event. It's free. We will put the Eventbrite link in the notes. And if you're in Edinburgh, it's at St Augustine's, which is a nice, fairly central venue, nice.
Very nice. George IV Bridge.
You can also get online tickets if you can't be there in person. They will be live streaming the event.
6 o'clock for drinks and nibbles.
Certainly, some of the film will be shown, and it'll be lively discussion and guests and things. It sounds like quite a good event. And then the Tuesday following that, you'll get the premiere of our behind the scenes, how we recorded that. And then yesterday we were all together in Edinburgh at a conference called, we do a lot of conferences, we're conference junkies, a Scottish Spring, and this was organised by the Electoral Reform Society. Really interesting group of speakers, and the keynote speaker was Mark Drakeford. What a great speaker. I was sitting sort of more or less in front of him, and when he's speaking, I've seen this when I've watched footage of him in the Senate. He does seem to look around a lot. But when he's speaking in front of you, it feels as if he's speaking only to you. He looks into your eyes and he talks to you, and he sort of almost is waiting for your response. It's a really engaging style.
I thought I had exactly the same in my mind there. I kept thinking, I mean, I know we were in the front row. so fair enough. He was looking for, but that's a mark of a good speaker as well, actually, to be making eye contact. But a lot of the time I thought, my goodness, he's just speaking directly to me.
No. I was behind you and he was speaking to me.
Oh, there you go.
One of those portraits with the eyes fully around the room.
Yeah. It was, and it was a very thoughtful and thought-provoking speech. It was really, really good.
We're going to do a podcast selection of the things we got at the speech, because we recorded most of it. Some really interesting polling that was shared at that event. One was when they had a whole list of where trust lay in all the different institutions and bodies, the police, banks, political parties, etc. And it turns out that the second most trusted institution, way above all the politicians, everything else, was bloody supermarkets, providing a service that people trust more than they trust our politicians. There's something wrong there.
Yeah.
The other point from the polling that stuck in my mind was they looked at various emotional states of different voters, and the characteristic of the people in Scotland, I think, who said they were likely to vote Reform was very much to do with feeling disconnected and angry. So it was an interesting glimpse. I mean, it didn't give you any information like, well, what specifically are they angry about? It was your older men, angry old men. That's who's attracted to Reform.
The question was very general. How are you feeling about things in Scotland right now? And that's how vague it was. So, because when I looked at it, I thought, I'm angry about plenty of things.
Exactly.
I'm raging about plenty of things, but maybe not the same things that these people are angry about.
Yeah.
It was just a kind of snapshot. We are going to get that emailed out to us, so we're able to ask questions about it. So it might be interesting.
I might have said those things that I'm angry about, but I suspect the things I'm angry about, which would mainly be the media misrepresenting, the Yes movement, will not be the same things as a Conservative voter would be angry about, or someone who's thinking of voting reform. So how does that do you actually end up with anything that's very useful? He kind of looked a little bit taken aback, which I suspect he probably doesn't get someone very often saying, is this very useful?
Challenging.
I mean, and he did say what you've just said, actually. You ask a general question, so yeah, there's disadvantages to that. There's detail that you're not getting, but you do get an overall sense of an emotional kind of landscape. And I thought, oh, well, okay, fair enough. Yeah,
and I suppose then you go into your detailed focus groups and pry underneath it. But
and it is a big sample. I did ask him what sort of size sample it was, and he said they have a panel, and it's got about in Scotland, which has about 14,000 people in it. So that's big enough that then they can take a sample of that, people from that, and it's still a lot of people.
It was interesting as well, though, that they hadn't, in those group of public bodies that we had trust in, our level of trust, that they had omitted the media.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
And they had the Chief Executive of the Development Trust Association Scotland, Pauline Smith.
She was good.
And she was superb. Here's an ordinary person, just like us. People are fed up waiting for things to be done for them, and they're just getting on with doing it for themselves. And actually what they need is a bit more support to let them keep on doing that. Because that's what I sometimes think. People will moan about we live in a nanny state. And then they complain when things aren't done for them. And I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways.
Exactly. And I mean, in a way, she was there talking about that. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in that umbrella organisation. And in a way, they're just doing what you two did when you went out litter picking. You're just getting on with it. And they're doing it on a bigger scale. They've got different projects. But just recently, I came across this website, which is called Scottish Election Study. And within that, they've got what they call a Scoop monitor. Scoop probably stands for something, but I don't know what
Scottish
it is.
Opinion?
Oh, it could just be Scottish Opinion. Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be simple. So anyway, I had a look at it, and they did a big survey at the end of last year. So this was about, Holyrood constituency vote intentions. So this is from 2022, so it's 3 years worth. Labour went up, and then the end of last year and into this year they've gone down. Tories, not much change really, not much difference between Greens and Lib Dems. So anyway, that's looking quite good for the SNP because Labour's gone back down, although it's not that the SNP have gone up, but Labour's gone down quite a lot. They're
on about 33-34%.
Yeah, that's the SNP, and Labour have gone down. They were about that, and they've gone down to about 24, 25. Tories are coming in just under 20. Rest are about 10. The same people, but they're talking about the list vote intention. SNP is about the same, slightly down, but about the same level. And you get the same thing with Labour. It's gone up, it's come down. This time, the Tories have gone down a bit more. Greens, Lib Dems coming in still about 10%. And you see for those of you who are watching this one, the Reform have come up. They're there in the kind of turquoisey kind of colour. They're up at 10%. They're level with Greens and Lib Dems. And Alba's is there this time, and they're down where they always are in these things, 1 or 2%, which is not enough to get a seat. You'd expect to get similar numbers of Reform MSPs as Greens and Lib Dem, and Tories not much more, and it's quite a shift, isn't it?
Now, if you're struggling to visualise some of these graphs from audio-only description, we have put the link to the website that they're from in the notes.
You then start looking at how are they going to align themselves if it's not. I mean, Holyrood is designed not to be a majority Parliament, and it was supposed to be about collaboration and consensus and working together and getting things done.
Well, the natural bedfellows there is Reform and the Tories ganging up, isn't it? Because there's not much between them. But I wonder, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out in terms of a pro-independence majority.
Yeah, exactly. And this was done the end of last year, so it's a little bit out of date now. So it was done December last year. Right. They also asked about Westminster voting intention. Again, you kind of went, whoa, now they've nosedived. If that happened, we'd be back up at over 40 SNP MPs again. Tories, not much in difference, and this is in Scotland, of course. Lib Dems coming up, they've probably picked up votes from Labour. But there's one entry for Reform, because they've only been included in this since this year, and that is equal with the Tories. So the Tories are there at about 15%, and Reform's there at about 15%. So it's such a huge turnaround, isn't it?
It'll be interesting to see how that translates into seats, though, because just looking at the Greens there, that looks as if they're on maybe 4 or 5%, but that is not going to get them a seat under a first past the post.
No. Oh, there's probably not a chance. It'll be between the SNP and Labour, and unless... Could you imagine the folk in the borders starting to vote Reform?
Only if they don't think the Tories are far enough right for them, they might.
Let's not second guess. It's silly to do that.
We know the question to ask, where are they angriest? Because they're the ones who vote Reform, aren't they?
Oh, actually, that's true. That came out of the Diffley stats, didn't it? So I take it back, Mr. Diffley. Actually, they've turned out to be quite handy. So just to finish this off, kind of, you found these ones, Fiona. These are more recent. These are from this month, April. And it's about Holyrood constituency and regional voting. So these are 4 months on. But I think what's interesting is that, well, SNP are much higher than everyone else. But everyone else, it's kind of much of a muchness. It's all there about 10%. Not much difference between them. Well, Alba, they're not up at that. They're maybe as high as 6 for the regional voting, which might get them, an MSP. But everyone else, about 10%, and SNP 30, 20, say 30, something like that. So interesting times. This was the same thing, April. This is the Find Out Now vote, which was one of the recent ones that's shown an independence majority of about 56 once you take out the don't knows. So let's hope that carries on.
It's still a bit of an outlier at the moment. You really need another polling firm to come up with something similar before we can be confident, but it certainly seems to have put the cat among the pigeons a bit.
Exactly. And I mean that just the other day, this is the Glenrothes Central Ward, the by-election, and I mean I was seeing headlines like fantastic win for the SNP. Then I thought, but they held the seat anyway. It was their previous councillor who died, and so they've held on to it. But this is the first preference votes, and the Labour has crumbled a bit. I mean, SNP have double the number of first preferences, but Reform have got almost the same number of first preference votes as the Labour Party did.
24% turnout.
I know.
24%. And I think why people were surprised at this was because this is in a constituency that went right over to Labour in the general election. So I suppose Labour thought, that would have carried on and given them a bit of momentum. Yeah. But 24%. So the fact that Reform came third in first preference votes really doesn't say anything.
And that was one of the other comments was made yesterday, saying that kind of, to say we've got a democracy, really have we got a democracy? Because only 24% have turned out to vote. So the other 76% who were available to vote are getting what 24% of people voted for. So there was discussions, interesting discussions around voter registration, and they made the point that when you're 16, you get your national insurance number. They can just here's your voter registration. It's done for you.
Glasgow Council are going to go over to automatic registration, voting registration. Now, maybe that just means for local elections, I don't know, but there's certainly I got a notification through, and it was just saying that they're going to to get that through the Glasgow.
Was that not something that Mark Drakeford had in his speech? That somewhere in Wales they'd done something, and I remember thinking, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that in a devolved part."
Automatic.
It was. No, it was.
Automatic voter registration. Yeah.
Oh, well, if they can do it, why aren't we doing it? If Glasgow can do it, why isn't everywhere doing it?
We come up on this programme, don't we? We end up having a rant about why hasn't ScotGov done that? I mean, we've now found out that Wales can do it, so that presumably means we can do it. Yeah. So why the hell haven't they? You know,
exactly.
Come on, ScotGov, do it.
Come on, ScotGov. Well, let's go and have a look now. Just a couple of clips from Westminster and Holyrood and see if we get any insight into that question that Marlene's just asked. This is my favourite, actually, at the moment, Dave Doogan.
Oh, yeah, we're fans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His Chancellor's economic policies started off badly and have headed rapidly downhill from there. His Energy Secretary's policies ensure that energy-rich Scotland lives under the highest domestic and commercial energy prices in the world, and his Foreign Secretary provides diplomatic cover for the atrocities committed in Gaza by the IDF, to the horror of the people of Scotland. This is just one, but he is the incompetent-in-chief who refuses to bring his ministers into line. Just one of the reasons that independence enjoys an 11-point lead over remaining in this dysfunctional, broken Brexit Britain. Does he understand why the people of Scotland are so dissatisfied with the latest iteration of dysfunctional British rule in Scotland?
Does he understand the electorate in Scotland answered that question in July of last year? I remember there used to be quite a few of them sitting around here. Now it's a distant cry from up there.
And that, of course, is the situation we are in. It doesn't matter how good the argument is, they can point and say, but they didn't vote for you. That's what we've done to ourselves, everybody who voted Labour to get rid of the Tories.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't any of the three of us.
It wasn't any of the three of us.
Absolutely not. I did like his incompetent-in-chief.
I know.
He was quite riled up. So the next one, this is Stephen Flynn, and I thought this was quite good as well. I've not seen much of Stephen Flynn in the last few months, but this one was good.
But there's also one other hugely important issue which has not been discussed at any length in this chamber today, and notwithstanding the future contribution, I imagine, from the member for Alloa and Grangemouth, it's something which isn't going to pass the lips of any other members in this House, which is, of course, the situation in Grangemouth. And I say the situation in Grangemouth with an element of despair, because we all know that there are hundreds of people who are on the brink of losing their jobs. And the similarities are astounding. We have PetroChina on one hand, and we have a Chinese company in Scunthorpe in the other. We have a Chinese company in Scunthorpe saying that there's losses of around £700,000. We have a Chinese company at Grangemouth saying losses of around £500,000. We have a cracker in Grangemouth which has been deemed not to be useful anymore. And we, of course, have blast furnaces in Scunthorpe which are categorised in the same manner. All of us need to be conscious of those comparisons. And I say that on the basis that whilst the Secretary of State is right to say that this is important for jobs in Scunthorpe, this is right for the communities in Scunthorpe, and this is right for Westminster's national UK-wide interest, is it not the case that is important to the workers in Grangemouth? Is it not the case that it is important to the communities in Grangemouth? And is it not the case that it is in Scotland's national interest that Grangemouth is protected?
So good one, very good.
Well, I thought that was really interesting the way he compared the sort of Chinese ownership of one and the Chinese ownership of the other. And
well, he's basically saying it's like for like. Yet look at what Westminster have decided to do. Oh, we'll save Scunthorpe and Grangemouth. You can just do one.
Yeah, but it was interesting he gave a nod there to Brian Leishman, who, I must admit, is going up in my estimation from when I first saw him at the hustings in Alloa. Give him his due, he is one of the few Labour MPs willing to stand up for their constituents. And certainly, we'll come on to mine in a second, but Also, there was another, this is Zara Sultana in the debate about PIP. I think she's been drummed out for criticising the Labour Party. I think she stands as an independent now. But here's her in the PIP debate.
Since Labour came into power, 25,000 more children have been pushed into poverty due to the two-child benefit cap. And now, according to the government's own impact assessment, over 250,000 people will be pushed into poverty as a result of these cuts, including 50,000 children. So I asked the Chancellor, who earns over £150,000 annually, has accepted £7,500 worth of free clothing, and recently took freebie tickets to see Sabrina Carpenter. Does she think austerity 2.0 is the change people really voted for?
That's good.
No, that was clever, wasn't it?
I mean, she was suspended. There was 7 of them Labour MPs who voted to scrap the two-child benefit cap. She was one of the ones who was suspended. Yeah, she was good. I listened to that and I think, come to Scotland and we'd appreciate you more.
Who was it we were speaking to recently who said that Brian Leishman's in the wrong party?
Yeah. Just resign, come over. Only way to save his seat, actually.
Yeah, well, yes. Now, by contrast, this is my MP.
Thank you much, Mr. Speaker. Dunfermline is Scotland's newest city, and as such we have a large number of homes being built all the time. However, too often these large-scale housing developments are done without reference to local services such as GPs and without proper consultation with local people, partly due to failures in the Scottish Government SNP planning policy. What advice does the Minister have for how these issues might be overcome, and will he engage with the Scottish Government to make sure they are learning any lessons from the excellent changes being made in this part of the UK?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. Housing is a devolved matter, but I am always keen, Mr. Speaker, to convey to colleagues in the Scottish Government precisely the benefits of the proposals we're taking forward when it comes to planning reform and a renewed drive for house building.
Shamefaced little lapdog. I mean, as his constituent, you are not representing me by complaining about devolved policies in Westminster just so you can give a kick into the Scottish Government and let some nameless minister, I don't even know who that is, rub it in. I mean, that is not representation.
But that's the pattern. That is the pattern. I mean, we've just seen this.
Yeah.
We're not even very good at doing it.
Absolutely. And I've never heard him say anything positive about Scotland. I mean, he stands there. He obviously hates his country with a passion and doesn't care what happens to anybody in it as long as he scores points with Westminster. Shameful.
It was can the Minister help poor little Scotland to make our policies better, because our policies are terrible. What can you teach us? We need to learn from you.
Yeah. The cringe in action. Yeah. Oh. So over to Holyrood. Do you remember we did a podcast episode on the ICCPR, and this was a petition to have the United Nations International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So the petition had come up to the committee, and here's how they dealt with it.
Number 2135 to implement the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, and Scottish legislation, and it calls on the Scottish government to ensure that prior to the next Holyrood parliamentary election, this international covenant is given full legal effect in the devolved lawmaking process. The Spice briefing explains that the International Covenant was adopted in 1966 and ratified by the UK in 1976. Many of the rights set out in the ICCPR are reflected in international agreements and have been incorporated in UK human rights related legislation. The Scottish Government's response to the petition states that it is committed to a new human rights bill and will incorporate further international human rights standards into Scots law. The Scottish Government has developed and consulted on proposals to give effect to the recommendations from the National Task Force on Human Rights Leadership, which comprised a range of experts and stakeholders, including the Scottish Human Rights Commission. Now, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was not one of the treaties the task force recommended for incorporation, although it did recommend that further consideration be given to restating the rights contained within the Human Rights Act of 1998. The submission explains that when incorporating international treaties into domestic law, the Scottish Parliament can only give effect to provisions within its powers and responsibilities. This route cannot be used to effectively extend the Parliament's powers by claiming that the incorporating international treaty provisions now allow the Parliament or the Scottish Government to do anything that would have been previously beyond the Parliament's devolved competence. The petitioner's submission questions the position of the Scottish Government, stating that the issue of devolved competence is not relevant to full implementation of the Covenant. He believes that the Scottish Government's submission seeks to restrict and undermine the sovereignty of the Scottish people. Do colleagues have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr. Ewing?
Well, I've studied the response of the petitioner to the Scottish Government's written submission of the 31st of January. The petitioner's written response is 13th of March, and it does raise a whole series of issues, some of them somewhat technical and legal, but the thrust of it is that the petitioner does adduce various examples of statements, notably by the First Minister in 2023, when it was stated that there should be a right to participate in public affairs as expressed in Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the petitioner has highlighted originally that the MSPs continue to ignore the Parliament's motion of September 2012, which acknowledges the sovereign right of the Scottish people to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. The petitioner also challenges the view that this matter is not within the devolved competence of the Scottish Parliament and refers to the Scottish Human Rights Commission as endorsing that view. I do think that, without rehearsing the whole of what the petitioner has said on the 13th of March, that it does raise further issues of substance that I feel the Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson himself should be asked to comment on further, to do justice to the petitioner. This is the first time we have considered this matter, and I do think the petitioner is perhaps right when he states that it's disappointing that the reply from the Scottish Government was not issued by Angus Robertson but was issued by an official, and perhaps Mr. Robertson could be asked to give detailed comment on all the arguments which the petitioner set out in response to the initial Scottish Government position.
Mr. Golden?
I would echo Mr. Ewing's comment. I think as part of that response, it would be useful for the petitioner and indeed Parliament to understand what the Scottish Government's position is on the codification and enablement of international law in a devolved setting. We have a position from the Scottish Government on alignment with EU law, but I'm unclear as to how international law in the devolved setting is to be adhered to. I appreciate that. So I'm not asking for a treaty by treaty, but I also probably want to note that tomorrow there's a debate in Parliament around the Aarhus Convention 1998 and how that is being enabled in a devolved context. So it'd be useful to know the overall approach, and then I do have concerns that it may not be practical in the timescales for the Scottish Government to adhere to it as the petitioner requests. However, it would be interesting to know what the overall trajectory would be.
Thank you. Well, in the light of that, I have to say my own preference would, having looked at this petition, was to actually move to close it. But respecting the views of our two colleagues, are the committee content to let the petition run on the basis of the further inquiry to Mr. Robertson that has been suggested?
That's help from a couple of unexpected quarters there.
No, I mean, when I heard who he was calling, I just thought, oh dear, that's going to go down the tubes, and then it didn't. I mean, that's the first time I think I've ever agreed with Maurice Golden over anything that I've heard him say. That's really interesting, because it was back in February that that we interviewed, or we had a conversation with. Podcast was called Claiming Our Rights, wasn't it? And we were talking to Andy Anderson and Leah Gunn Barrett about all of that. So that was February. the petition, I think, was up and running by then, pretty certain.
It was live.
And that's really interesting to see where it's got to. So yeah, I mean, good on them. I think that's a really good example of these committees, working together and coming up with, in this case, somewhat two rather surprising champions. Given that we know what the source of that petitions it was from, what the kind of political views that they have. So great, good on them.
There was quite a lot of technical kind of language about treaties and this, that, the next thing, and I was like, oh, right.
We actually went into that quite a lot on the podcast episode, so I'll put the link to that below, and then if anybody wants to find more about the background to the petition. In the light of that poll showing the increase in the support for independence, and again, it's Angus Robertson is called into question a bit.
Enough, sir, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its strategy to further the case for Scottish independence in light of the reported polling indicating a majority in support.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government believes the best outcomes for Scotland will come if we ensure that more of the decisions about Scotland are taken by and for the people of Scotland. The First Minister is setting out a vision of a country free from child poverty, with higher living standards and with the powers of independence to create the kind of Scotland that we know is possible. We remain committed to publishing a final overview independence paper to give people in Scotland the information that they need to make an informed choice about their constitutional future.
Madam.
I thank him for that answer. People in Scotland are recognising the democratic deficit that we face. Given this growing public awareness, can the Scottish Government provide an update on how it intends to build on that momentum and continue informing the public through its civic engagement and public education about the opportunities of Scotland becoming an independent country?
Well, I agree with the member, and I think that it's important to say that the Scottish Government has set out and will continue to set out the opportunities that will come from being an independent country. We've set out our plans for the economy of an independent Scotland, for rejoining the European Union, for a new constitution with democracy, rights and equality at its heart, and for an inclusive, welcoming approach to citizenship, as well as a migration system that meets Scotland's needs. The First Minister is also setting out our 4 priorities for government through a series of speeches, and will continue to speak to the issues that matter to the public so that people can have an informed choice about the future options that are available to them all.
God, that was boring.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Not the person who asked the question.
No.
Good on her.
The answer.
The first one, it's like he was reading a script pretty well. So maybe that's kind of what you do. But I thought, okay, once he gets to come back, maybe he'll come alive a bit. And it was much the same it's more detailed, but it was the same phrases. And oh, God.
We're going into Holyrood 2026. Is that going to get any independent supporter fired up?
No.
Now, we need a more radical approach.
Yeah.
We really need people to see, and I do think some people are seeing, as a result of Labour being in power in Westminster and all their promises, change. Yes, we're going to take your winter fuel allowance away. Yes, you're still paying higher fuel bills in Scotland. No, your 2-child cap. And there needs to be an element of our government explaining that currently all we're really able to do is mitigate against Westminster policies. They're tinkering around the edges with other things, and they need to be radical. They need to just explain that. You're not going to get all these things that we can do, that we know are possible. We need independence to do that.
Yeah. Yep. So, no point for Angus.
Yeah, Angus can trot off for a wee while.
Okay, this is the last one from Holyrood. Again, committees, far more interesting than anything you hear on the floor, I think. And this was a particularly interesting one. It was the Net Zero Committee. They were talking about buses. And they had 2 Tories desperately digging to prove that the under-22s are responsible for all the antisocial behaviour. And they've been at this for a while.
And there's a perception, and I'm just saying it's a perception, that it's increased because of the under-22 free travel. Has there been anything to back that up at all?
Not from our own evidence, I would say. As I mentioned, our compliance team are on buses 7 days a week, different times of the day, etc. And they haven't seen anything or reported anything that's been what we would class as antisocial behaviour.
And very briefly, sorry, it's just to ask Isla, maybe not from your experience, but from other young people you've spoken to, how does, when they see other young people abusing the privilege, how does that make you feel?
So we actually find that a lot of young people don't feel that there's a rise in antisocial behaviour, and from our consultations with young people have said that they often feel as if there's this kind of stigma that young people are the ones causing problems, whereas in reality they feel as if they're the ones being targeted when there is abuse on these public transport services. The Young Scot Truth About Youth report saw that over a half of Scotland's young people feel unsafe on public transport whenever they take it, because there are these problems in place where you have staff or other passengers that perceive young people as the troublemakers and then cause trouble with those young people. And some quotes of this is, "I don't feel safe on public transportation because men are very likely to say something or touch you, especially as a young woman." And one of our national campaigns this year is to end gender-based violence, and it's something that our committee has been focusing on services, because young women and girls primarily feel threatened when they take public transport. Often being looked at, videoed, or lots of people have said that they'll be sitting on an empty carriage and someone, usually a man, will come and sit next to them on a completely empty carriage. And this creates a really bad atmosphere for young people. And then we have these conversations where we're talking about this antisocial behaviour that's supposedly caused by young people. But in reality, young people face it a lot more than the older generation seem to perceive.
Thank you.
Actually, that's great. That young woman's very impressive.
Wasn't she?
I'm a bit shocked, actually. I didn't. I mean, I would have guessed that there'll be creeps that go around and try and
videoing them
or wash young women on the buses or the trains. But that seems to be a bit more than that seems to be a quite frequently experienced thing. That's horrible. You'd hope that other passengers would intervene and tell them to bugger off, but that bit about coming in an empty carriage and a bloke come in and sit down, that's horrible. Bad behaviour.
But what was good was that I could reference to the Young Scot Truth About Youth and talking about ending gender-based violence. So it wasn't just, there was some anecdotal evidence there as well, but there was actual research that had been done on it. So she was quoting from a place of knowledge, and actually good to let older people see the world through younger people's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the one hand, we're thinking it's great. They've got free bus passes so they can go and get on buses, and it will open opportunities for them. But actually, a lot of the time, they're fearful of using it because of other potential incidents, particularly young women.
I mean, you'd kind of imagine it wouldn't be happening so much during the day, if you're going to a job or something like that. Maybe it's more in the evenings. But, she didn't say that, so could be wrong. I'm a bit depressed because you would have hoped, because that's been happening for a hell of a long time. I mean, I bet the three of us have had experiences like that.
Oh, yeah.
And you just think, and it still just happens, and it's the same, group of men.
Same perpetrators,
Maybe we should ban men from the public transport.
Ban men,
Why is it always the women who have adopt our behaviour? Why isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, anyway, that was really, I'm glad you found that clip. That was really good.
She at least gives you some hope for the future. If that's the quality of our young people, fabulous. Well done, Isla. The other point I just came across, have either of you aware of the fact that there are people's panels? And I think I've come across 3 now, where the committee is taking evidence, which is a paper or recommendations which have come from a people's panel. And it's like a mini citizens' assembly. It takes place with a representative group drawn from the population, and over 1 or 2 weekends, and they consider an issue in depth. One time it was I think it was green transport, actually. It was a while back. And the most recent one was to do with the drugs crisis. And, that's the kind of thing that is that sort of democracy in action and the citizens' participation. And you hear nothing about it. And there's another thing, Marlene's often picks up that the Scottish Government are not good at blowing their own trumpet. Well, there's another example of something that actually is a really good thing. So I'm going to have a look when I get a minute and see if there is some information about the People's Panels on the ScotGov website. And if there isn't,
it was something that was mentioned yesterday, saying that some of the committee, because people were sort of saying, these committees and whatnot, and they're taking representation from big corporations that have a vested interest in it, but they're not taking representations from the people that it impacts on. Well, and people were saying, there's a time scale and we know we can get hold of these big corporations, and you're kind of like, man, that's pretty shoddy, actually, because you're not...
although to be fair, actually what they said was that if we don't include these corporations, we know that they will make a big stooshy about it, so you kind of have them in, and then you end up, that's taken up part of your the time. I thought that was pretty bad, actually, that happens, because you ought to be able to do something to get round that.
Or by all means have them there, because yes, there may be businesses that are operating in Scotland, and we want to have businesses operating in Scotland, but you need the voice of the people as well, because that's who the government are there. They're there to govern for the people. Did somebody not make the suggestion yesterday, or maybe somewhere else I heard it, that a bit like jury duty?
Yeah, so that was Craig DL's idea. You'd have an upper house where you... that would be great if we had that, and it would mean that you had a whole other bunch of people who could take evidence like that and maybe be a bit more relaxed about it as well, because, fair enough, these committees are there to, scrutinise legislation that comes down, so they're on a bit of a time limit there. But it just, nevertheless, it just seems like they need to find a way of getting things to be better than that. Yeah. We featured a few things from Trump in our last couple of live streams. This is sort of the Democrats' fight back. And I thought this was a senator whose name I actually can't remember. It'll be on the clip, I think. And this was a part of a speech that he gave, the town halls that they have. He did that, but he went into a strongly Republican voting area. So he wasn't talking to his own people. He was talking to the people who voted for Trump.
They do not care. Trump's cabinet is worth like $60 billion. That's not even including Elon. They are literally the elites they pretend to hate. The president is not at his palace in Florida thinking about whether you can afford daycare for your daughter, or how to stop insurance companies from denying your claim, or anything that matters to our daily lives. When is the last time you even heard Donald Trump talk about health care or child care? He's talking about invading Greenland. This is why things don't work for ordinary people. It's not because of trans kids or woke college students. It's not... It's not because of our new arch enemy, Canada. The corruption is why you pay a fortune for prescriptions. The corruption is why your insurance claim keeps getting denied. The corruption is why hedge funds get to buy up all the houses in your neighborhood and Congress doesn't do anything about it. See, this is why so many have lost faith in our system. Because the system really is rigged. But Trump's not unrigging it. He's re-rigging it for himself. It was just reported that dinner with the president at Mar-a-Lago is on sale for just $5 million. And really, the whole royal family is cashing in. Don Jr. setting up a new business empire. Jared's investment firm got $2 billion from the Saudi royal family. Like, Hunter Biden should have been more ambitious.
But isn't he good?
Very good. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. You know, every time, I was reading today actually, every time Trump goes off down to Florida or Mar-a-Lago at the weekend to have a game of golf, that costs the American public at least $3 million for all the security and stuff round about it. And a lot of that $3 million is going into his pocket because people are staying in his setup down there.
And if it's £5 million for dinner with him, well, or $5 million. Oh. The last clip I've got is Poundshop Trump, and this is led by donkeys at the Reform UK conference. Now, this is one clip that really doesn't work on the podcast edition because there is no narrative. It's just a series of images which were projected by Led by Donkeys onto the wall of the conference hall, and they had things like Farage with Vladimir Putin welcoming delegates. A lot of the footage is policemen and people in the street just looking up at this and going, whoa. If you want to see the clip, it is on the YouTube version of this. But it did spark quite a bit of conversation in the studio, so we left the reference in.
Very good. They're just so good, aren't they? They managed to do these things. I just wish we had a group of folk in Scotland who was doing that kind of thing in support of independence, because it could be so funny and people see it, you know, just because they're passing by and take photos. And
you here must have some spare time some weekend, surely.
I know.
I've got an outdoor projector as well, which I've never used.
Well, there you go. I mean, coming up, we could be the core group, and
it's got a USB input as well, so you can take the projector in the car, drive it somewhere, jump out, project something, and right. That's our mission for the summer, to get that going. But what just made me think when that our response to Led by Donkeys, you said something, Marlene, after our Brussels adventure when you were talking about the MEP. You'd said something about, oh, we keep hearing Scotland's too small. And she just laughed completely. And you were saying, do you know, maybe that's how, instead of engaging with people and trying to have a conversation when it's that kind of allegation, just laugh. And that's kind of what Led by Donkeys do. They just make fun of them.
They just make fun of them. It's true. And I said, no, the kind of, you know, things that unionists say to Scotland. I mean, for example, one is, you know, too small, and, you know, next to the UK, we're your biggest customer and you're too small to. She wasn't quite rolling on the floor laughing, but she was definitely laughing out loud. So it was definitely LOL, and she just like guffawed and laughed and said, oh wow, gosh, Malta and Luxembourg must be having a really hard time, you know. And I just thought, we should do that. So since then on social media posts, when I see daft comments like that, I just put in a load of laughing emojis. Just leave it.
Maybe that's the easiest way.
So what would you call yourselves? Would it be Led by Haggis or something like that?
Led by Scottish donkeys. That's a reference back to, was it the First World War?
It was lions led by.
It was lions led by donkeys. It was donkeys. It was lions was the soldiers, and donkeys referred to the generals and the officers. Well, the generals, First World War generals. So we'll have to have it's a good point, Lynn. We'll have to have a wee think about the name. We need a name for the project.
Yeah, because having just announced it on our show, we obviously want to be anonymous.
Fantastic. Roundup for the month of April. Fantastic.
Yes.
This is looking ahead into May, 13th of May, 7 o'clock, Heart of Scotland Community Centre, and it's a free event. It's organised by Yes Glasgow North West. Talk by Scott Donoghue about Grangemouth, situation Grangemouth, and he's putting it into the wider perspective of how Scotland gets assets stripped. So 7 p.m, Tuesday, 13th of May. It's 64 Balmoral Street, G14. But have a look for it online. It should be on Facebook soon. It's not there at the moment.
Yeah, there won't be an equivalent of this show at the end of May because I'm on holiday and Marlene's on holiday. So we haven't missed a week of the podcast for the 3 years we've been running. It might be just that something goes out that's audio only.
Yeah.
And we'll make up for it in June.
Great. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.